During the early morning hours of the 7th of April, two US guided missile destroyers, the USS Ross and the USS Porter, fired 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles at the Syrian Arab Air Force base of Al-Shayrat. Al-Masdar News, which is the primary source for OzAnalysis Syrian war updates, had predicted some 4 hours beforehand that two American destroyers were on high alert with their vertical launch tubes spooled up and were likely to fire, also correctly naming both vessels. There are conflicted accounts on whether or not Moscow was warned in advance of the missile strike. Regardless, the Syrian air defense network kicked in as soon as it became apparent that a massive missile bombardment was inbound. In the end, 23 cruise missiles hit the airbase, and this means that some 36 were either intercepted, lost their way, or crashed. Considering the general reliability of contemporary Tomahawk types, it is likely that the vast majority were actually shot down. It is also speculated that some missiles had their GPS navigation data links jammed by top-secret Russian soft-kill systems, which drove them off course. Nonetheless, the sheer concentration of the missile bombardment did eventually result in about 40% of the Tomahawks slipping through the air defences and hitting their marks, and when they did, they hit hard. The principal strikes on the airbase were a number of hardened shelters at both the eastern and western extremes of the facility, resulting in the destruction of 6 MiG-23s in various states of repair, the base radar and an attached anti-aircraft system stationed outside the airfield perimeter, and a weapons storage centre. Fuel tankers parked out on their preparation zones were also struck, causing fires which resulted in a number of casualties and took hours to put out. Incredibly, the airstrip avoided any real damage, and most of the operational combat aircraft stationed at the base were moved out onto the grass and were ultimately spared. Despite the initial panicked reports coming in that the airbase had been wiped off the map, the reality stands that the damage was so minimum that within 36 hours the base was fully operational again, with Syrian attack aircraft leaving their hangars to bomb terrorist forces in the area of Palmyra, Deir ez-Zor and northern Hama. Overall, the events of April 7th has witnessed a major escalation between the United States of America and the Russian Federation over the issue of the Syrian war. For the first time in the conflict, the United States has openly attacked Syrian government forces. The attack was unleashed without formal warning or provocation and without approval from the US Congress, making a complete hypocrite of President Trump. The American pretext for such action was based on unproved and, just like every other American excuse for going to war since Vietnam, what will ultimately turn out to be a fallacious claim that the Syrian Arab Air Force used sarin gas against civilians in a chemical attack on the town of Khan Sheikhoun. Moscow has responded to this breach of Syrian sovereignty by vowing to further strengthen Syria's air defense network and by suspending the deconflicting hotline it shared with the US-led coalition that was originally put in place to prevent accidental combat incidents between the two forces. In any case, this most recent action by the US has proved that even under the Trump administration, the regime change agenda of the Obama era remains unchanged in scope or priority. Clearly, the American establishment is far more interested in ousting President Bashar al-Assad than fighting terrorism, and to this end, the directing of 59 cruise missiles at government forces which have been fighting armed jihadist and Islamist militias for the last 6 years took priority over directing such firepower at ISIS terrorists. With all this being said, the ball remains in Washington's court over whether it wants to de-escalate this new level of tensions between it and Moscow, or if it wants to continue the path towards confrontation. Considering the Americans have a track record of attacking their enemies with overwhelming numbers and without a formal declaration of war, the best bet will be to track the movement of US aircraft carriers. If 2 or more supercarriers find their way into the Mediterranean Sea at the same time, then we will know what course of action Washington has chosen. The Russians in this case will be faced with 2 choices: to stand up or to back down. In the face of US expeditionary air power and its general power projection potential, the Russian air and naval bases in Syria are extremely vulnerable and in no position to withstand a sustained US attack. If the Russians do accept battle with the United States, their only chance would be to attack first, paradoxically making themselves out to be the aggressors, and to strike at the American carrier fleets. In this regard, the battle for Syria would be decided in the air and at sea within a matter of hours. So the final question comes to light: how far are both sides willing to go?